Good afternoon. These have been some amazing interviews this afternoon. So thank all of you for joining us. It brings me great honor to sit next to this lady. More than 100 books. I just asked her. I said, "Do you even keep track of the number of books anymore?" She says, "No, I always have to kind of look it up." She's just been cranking them out, and I think it's in like multiple genres. So, do you want to maybe discuss who you choose, what genre you want to write in, or do you write the story and then you just decide on which genre it kind of fits into?
That's an interesting question. I don't think that I kind of make a choice because I started out as an writer. Um, Most of the stories that I have some sort of relationship element to it. And it depends very often the type of stories that I write, depending on the publishing house that I'm writing for. So, for example, I write for Harlequin, and Harlequin does romance, so that's what I write for them. For St. Martin's or Kensington, they would do my women's fiction work. I'm currently writing for Entangled Publishing, and they've allowed me to do historical fiction with a romantic element. So a lot of it has to do with the house that I'm writing for, and that will sort of be the deciding factor what they're looking for.
Do you have a favorite genre, or is that like choosing your favorite baby?
It's like choosing a favorite baby. I like writing the women's fiction more because it gives me um, a wider landscape to work under. It doesn't have to have a happily ever after. I don't have to fit into specific categories within the stories. So that's always extremely helpful. So I think I enjoy that more because I have a little bit more freedom. But the formula of writing a romance is actually kind of helpful because you know where you're going to go. But the challenge comes with writing women's fiction for sure. Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought up the formula for writing romance. There is actually a formula to writing. If you're going to write a true romance novel, then it needs to hit that formula. Should you vary from that a little, or should you stick with the formula?
Well, I mean, you can kind of make adjustments to the formula, but romance readers expect certain things. Just like if you are a mystery writer and you're a mystery reader, you're going to expect a mystery. With romance, there are certain things that are required. So, for example, you cannot have a relationship where the hero and the heroine meet each other, they break up and get together with somebody else, right, and then come back together again. That doesn't happen in a romance. You can do it in a romance fiction story. And they have to have their complications, and they have to come to their happily ever after. So those are like the criteria for the romances. And depending on the publishing house that you're working with, it depends on the length and things like that. How much sex can be in it, and how much sex cannot be in it. So they have all those different types of criteria.
Now, the third book, I Am Aya, that's a longer novel. Because I'm looking at it now. How many pages is this one?
When the manuscript pages were probably about 400 and shade. And then, of course, when they put it in, it was, comes out a little bit shorter, but it was a much longer book. And it's because it's historical in nature. It does have a happily ever after ending, but it takes them a minute to get there.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about the premise of the story?
So, I Am Ida is a novel that there's two parallel stories that are running. There's the present and there's the past. And my main character, my contemporary character, has to return home to take care of her father, her ailing father. She grew up never understanding or knowing anything about her family or her past or her history. And her mother was sort of this bougie black woman who wanted to start this whole new life for them and basically ignoring the past. When she returns home to take care of her father, she discovers a chest that contains all of the artifacts of her family going back to when her great great grandmother was captured on the shores of Sierra Leone. Um, and within this chest, as she is developing who she is and coming to grips with that, she's also finding out what happened to her lineage. And she finds this out through all of the artifacts that are in this chest. So it's these two stories that are happening at the same time. You hear the voices of her ancestors while she's making these discoveries through letters and journals and different pieces of material, news clippings, slave catcher warner ads. So all of these things she finds in the chest, and that's what helps her to become who she is.
It sounds like, first of all, it's a story with a lot of layers, but then as I'm listening to the things that she's finding in the chest, the items that she's finding, are those based on real life events that have happened?
A lot of the things that she finds, because the way that I developed the story, I wanted to have her family um, appear in certain parts of history. Yes. And so one of her family members, they were there during the Tulsa race riots. Another one of her family members was in the early days of Sag Harbor, when it was a sanctuary for free blacks. One of her other family members was in Chicago during the Great Chicago Fire. Um, Another one of her ancestors came up during the Great Depression. So all of these different time periods are part of her lineage, and she knew nothing about. And so I have a lot of real-time events that actually happen. You see the fires, you see what happens with the depression, you see what happens to each of her ancestors and how they survive.
Did you learn anything from this process? Because this seems like it's like a running list of so many historical events. Did you learn some things that maybe you just didn't know before?
One of the first things that I learned, which I thought was prophetic, was as I was doing my research, because I love Sag Harbor, and I wanted my story to take place in Sag Harbor. And as I was doing my research, I discovered that the slave ship, the Amistad, docked right out of Sag Harbor. And as I'm reading and collecting all of this material, I turned on my TV one day and what's on TV but La Homicide. I was like, okay, so this is a sign from God that this is what I should be writing about. So like all of those different things, and just really coming to understand the importance of knowing where we came from, what our history is, because I teach in college, and many of my students, you ask them, well, where are you from? And they'll say, I'm in Brooklyn, so they'll say, I'm from Crown Heights, but that's really not where you're from. And they have no idea who their family is beyond maybe their grandmother, right? And so I found that was very important. I started looking at my own history, my own family history, and taking notes. And we actually had an oral history course at the college that I teach at Mega University. So that was all part of it as well. So it was very informative.
I feel like if I were writing this story, I would get so caught up in all of those historical facts and all of that history that I would forget that this is supposed to be a romance. So how did you keep yourself on task to remember that you have to put a little romance in here as well?
Well, there's levels of romance in each of the stories because even in the past, my heroines, who are my main characters, um, maternal ancestors, each of them were in a relationship. And so that part of it kind of now to write that part. But what I didn't I wanted the history to be part of the relationship, but I didn't want it to take over the relationship. I wanted to be able to show how our people existed and survived during these particular times. They survived through the strength of family. They survived through the strength of their relationships, their communities. So all of those things are important. And so we kind of work together. I didn't feel that there was a struggle of trying to keep one thing or the other um, in the forefront. I think what was difficult is that all of the research sort of sends you down a rabbit hole, and so you have so much information that you have to constantly try to figure out what can I use and what can I not use. Yeah, so that was probably more than I had more stuff that I'll never be able to use.
Maybe there'll be another book. So, look, I mentioned the cover earlier. This is the book that we're talking about. I Am Aya. The cover is absolutely gorgeous. Is this original art from someone that you know, or?
The publisher is actually founded, and it went through a couple of iterations in terms of what colors we were going to use, but that was the artwork that they selected, and I loved it as soon as I saw it. The original cover, her headdress was in red, but we changed it to purple and gave her the lashes and all that. But I always loved this cover.
Is there a reason you chose the color purple?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe it was some sort of inspiration that I don't even know anything about, but I just loved the purple.
It's royalty.
Maybe Alice Walker was talking to me.
So, when was this book? When did this book hit the stands? Okay, so this book hit the stands in May, so it's still fairly new. Have you gotten a lot of good feedback on it?
Yeah, actually, I just got notified yesterday that Publishers Weekly selected it as one of its best books for 2023. So that was kind of exciting. So it's done very well so far. Everybody that liked it, read it, have really enjoyed it. The narrator, the young woman who narrates this book for the audio, did a fabulous job. So if you're not a reader and you try a lot of listen to a book, she does it really well.
Good to know. That's good that you say that, because a narrator can make or break a story. And there have been audiobooks I've listened to that I stopped listening to, not because the story wasn't good, it's because of the way it was presented. So when you have a good narrator, that's a great thing. You find a good thing.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you teach at Medgar Evers College and you teach creative writing. Are there some things, or maybe preconceived notions, that some of your younger students may have when they come to a creative writing class? Like, do they think it's going to be easy because it's just writing, or do they think it's harder because it's creative writing?
Well, mostly, I think that when students come into the fiction class, because this is a course in fiction, that yes, they think, oh, this is going to be an easy class because I can just sit down and make stuff up, and don't understand, all that goes into actually crafting something that makes sense. So they do kind of come in there with that impression, but they leave really differently. Most times I teach composition, but every other semester I'll teach the fiction courses, and so that's what I found with the students. Yeah, they come in and they think, oh, this is an easy A, and it's not.
What are, we have a lot of new authors, up and coming authors here. What are 2 pieces of advice you would give to an author who is going through the writing process to get to the finish line of the book?
To read, because if you don't read, you can't write. I can't tell you the amount of, up and coming writers who say, I want to write a book. Well, what are you reading? Well, I'm not reading anything. The last thing I read, I was in college. or high school. So you have to read. You need to be aware of the world.
We're getting a note that the sound is a little low, so maybe yeah.
Okay. And you have to be aware of what's going on in the world. You have to pay attention to conversations, and you have to understand that it's a craft. And simply because you have an idea doesn't necessarily mean that it's worthy of being a novel. It just isn't. Sometimes your story is just good for Thanksgiving get-togethers, or at the barbecue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a novel. And it's just like anything else. If you want to be good at it, you have to practice at it. And you can't be afraid of being edited. Um, that's important. Um, if you are not great in grammar, take a class. There's nothing worse than reading a book and you can't understand what the writer is talking about. So, just reading, writing, studying the craft. There was one analogy that I used when I was talking, to students about, their writing. Like simply because you watch, General Hospital, it's not going to make you a doctor. Well, I've watched, Law and Order SVU, so I know how to solve crimes. No, you really don't. And it's the same thing with writing. If you don't practice it, if you don't honor the craft, then the work will suffer as a result.
Absolutely. And I had, well, the screen isn't on right now, but I had a quote about that. And I said, if you don't put your best foot forward, if you don't continue to try to improve in your writing, it's basically an insult to everybody who's going to read your work. There are some people who learn how to read and write by reading our work. And so we're affecting the next generation when we don't take it as serious.
Absolutely. And I think that so many of us, especially Black writers, have had it difficult in the contemporary marketplace. And so we've struggled and put ourselves out there in order for the next generations of writers to come along. So when they don't honor the work and honor the work that goes into it, it's a take on everybody, basically. And just not to think, and then the other thing too is, a lot of people think that, writers are rich. We ain't rich. Most of us have jobs. And so, to think about, is this going to be a hobby or is it going to be a career? You want to think about things like that, and how much value you're actually putting into what you're writing about, what you're going to put in the page. Because long after you're gone, your works will be there, and they're going to represent you. So, what do you want the world to see?
Very good point. That's such a good point. Like, our books are a legacy because they will be around even long after we're gone. And you don't want people to remember us for putting out trash, right? So now you have written more than 100 books. You are teaching creative writing. What is your writing process? When do you really get to wind down and say, okay, now it's time to work on my stuff?
I was having this conversation about what my process is. I wish I could say, as a teacher, I would tell my students one thing. And the first thing I tell them is just do what I say, don't do what I do. Because I am very bad. When I first started out, my kids were young. And so they would run around the house and there was always noise and we had a noisy dog. And so I learned how to write under chaos and noise. And so even now, I can still do that at any given time. Whereas a lot of writers, they need to be in a special place, they have to have a glass of wine, they have to go up to the cabin, they have to have I mean, I can sit on my couch and write with the news in the background. I can write in a cab. You know, if we weren't talking, I could sit here and write amongst all this noise. And so you have to find what works for you. You know, I have friends that they write first thing in the morning. I know I'm not a morning person, so I can't do that. It doesn't work for me. Some people write at night. I write in between the other things that I'm doing. So if I'm teaching a class and I have a break, a lot of times I'll be sitting in my office and my supervisor will be thinking I'm in there with a student and I'm working on my novel. So
Don't tell everybody.
right, she's not. So you know, there's things like that. I write when I travel. I write when I'm on the bus or a cab. But you have to find a method that works for you. And if that means, especially starting out, when I wrote my very first novel, I wrote it longhand in a notebook on the subway, going back and forth to work. And that's what I did until it was finished. And I would come home at night when my kids were little, and I would type out what I wrote. And back then, I didn't have a computer. I had a typewriter, so electric, with the carbon paper and the whiteout. So that's how long ago that was. And that's what I had to do. But I think, if this is something that you want, you have to make up your mind that this is what you're going to do, and what do you need to do to get it done for yourself, and what kind of time you want to carve out. So many writers will say, "Well, I don't have time," and how am I going to do this? Make time. If your time is running your mouth on the telephone, maybe that's the time that you write. When you go on your lunch breaks, maybe that's the time that you write, that hour, during the day, when you come home from service on a Sunday, whatever it is, to get your brain to start thinking about this is the process and this is what I can do.
I often tell new writers that they can set goals for themselves. Don't try to look at it as I have to write 10 pages a day, or I have to write. Even if you write a page or a paragraph, if you do that every day, you're eventually going to get there. But write what you can, but you have to consistently write in order for you to get to that finish line.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because if you think about it, if you wrote a page a day, at the end of the year, you have 365 pages. And that's a full-length novel. I mean, it might not be perfect or publishable, but it'll be finished. So think about it that way. That's true. Some days when I'm writing, I'll look over the work that I've done and I'm sitting there working, and I'll realize, after 2 hours, I may have only written a decent couple of sentences. And sometimes what I do when I'm not physically writing the words is I go back over what I've already done, reacclimate myself to the text, refamiliarize myself with the dialogue where I was, and then I go in and I see things that I didn't see before, and I make those corrections, and then I move on. It's almost like taking an energy pill,
Right.
and so that gives me that boost to continue moving. So that's a process that I use, and it helps me a lot. So like I said, you have to find what works for you.
So not that I'm not rushing you, I'm just asking. But now that I am Aya the way home. I didn't see the logo. I am Aya the way home. So now that it's out and it's been up for a few months, are you already working on the next project? I knew you were gonna say yes. Are you ready to tell us about it? You're just gonna okay.
I'm actually working on 2 books right now. One is another historical, and it is about the Pullman Porters.
Oh wow, that's really great.
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of research on that. So that's more of a research process right now. I have some pages that are already done, and then another novel that I'm working on for Harlequin. I'm halfway through that one, so I think that'll be out next. Both of those will be out sometime next year, if I ever finish my research. So I'm really excited about the Pullman Porter story because I have so much information that I've gone down a rabbit hole and have to figure out what I'm going to be able to use and not use. And of course, for my readers who enjoy the romantic element, there is a relationship that happens. Um, and I didn't realize until I started doing the work that not only was it the men, but there were women that, work those trains as well. So that'll be part of the story also.
Okay. So now, when you go to choose what you're going to write, or what you're going to keep, or what you're not going to keep, do you kind of outline? Do you use an outline format to figure out what you want to keep and what you don't?
Yeah, I use an outline before I start writing. So I generally know what it is that I'm going to be writing about before I get started. I'll make adjustments as I go along, but for the most part, I already have an idea of what the story is, and I'll, move things around. As I'm doing my research to help supplement the outline, that's how I begin to sort of see what will work and what won't work. Because you can't put in everything. So I make certain decisions about what is going to serve the story, and that's how I kind of like eliminate certain things.
So does anybody have any questions for Donna before we? Oh, okay. Come on, Cooper. I'm gonna put this close to you. Oh.
Hi, thank you so much for your show. You mentioned that you're heading to books at one time, and I was wondering how you compartmentalize to look at because for many of us, it's hard to just write one minute. So how do you keep that process going? How do you keep it separate more?
I think for me, what makes it doable is that they're two different types of books. One requires, it's almost like how you have left brain and right brain. So, and I don't know which one is which, but my romance novels are very instinctual. So it's a little easier for me to kind of like figure out what to do. Um, and so that's one part of my brain that is already kind of trained to do that. And then for the more complex work, like these historical type novels, it takes a different kind of work. It takes the kind of work that I do at school when I have to do research. And so I think that helps to kind of separate things out a little bit. It helps me. And I don't work on both of them. When I say I'm working on two books, I'm not working on them like side by side. I may get the feel that today is the day that I want to work on my Harlequin book, and I'll sit down and I'll, write and write until I don't feel like I want to do it anymore. And today is the day that I want to, write a couple more pages on the historical, and I will do that. So that other part of me is kind of cut off. But yeah, hopefully they'll be done at some point.
Ooh. There we go. We have the close.
Okay. One is writing process. And I'm just curious what helps keep that writing fresh for you because you write differently. That's one question. And the second question is, what are some things about traditional publishing that we may not know that maybe aren't as glamorous, the other side of that isn't always talked about?
So I'll answer the publishing question first. It's generally not glamorous at all. Like I was saying earlier, the 90% of writers have a full-time job or do something else. The idea that when you hear about these mega deals, that's rare. It's not happening for everybody. Everybody's not getting six-figure deals and movie contracts and all that. It's very rare. And even more so for us. So that's the other thing. One other thing that most people don't realize is that writers don't get paid every week. You don't get a paycheck every week. You don't even get a paycheck every month. So you get paid every 6 months. Well, for most contracts, you get paid twice a year. And that's based on the sales from the previous 6 months. So if your book didn't do well in 6 months, when it's time to get paid your royalties, you may not get any money, like at all. There's times when you owe the publisher money. So there's all of these other little things. And the royalty rates that we get, a lot of times you'll get in advance. And so you'll think, oh, this is wonderful. They gave you this X amount of dollars advance. But if you don't earn that money back,
Right.
you still owe the publisher. You won't get any return because it's sort of like getting an advance on your paycheck, and you haven't really done the work yet. And the work is the sales of your books. So that was so that's that part about publishing. And your first question was, oh, the different genres. I think that for me, working with different publishers sort of dictate the genre that I fall into. I've always been, a mystery and suspense reader. So a lot of, things that I do have that kind of feel to them as well. There's something that needs to be discovered. And so when I move back and forth from one genre to the other, because I've been doing it for a while, I understand what the criteria is and what's required. And then also too, what it is that I want to write, and where that's actually going to fall. So that's part of the decision-making process for me.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you once again for spending some time with us here at the National Black Book Festival. Thank you for the tools of wisdom when it comes to writing, and I'm looking forward to reading this book.
Thank you.
So congratulations on all you're doing.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to get a copy of I Am Aya, The Way Home, Donna will be at the front table near the door. You can get the books there. She will be signing them for you there. So thank you so much. We have one interview left that's going to take place at 4 o'clock. Mr. Neale Miller. So let's make sure that you're right back here for that. And for those of you who are waiting for me to pull the winner of the $2,500 exposure package, I'll be doing that in about 2 minutes. Just give me a chance to get back to my table, y'all. All right, thank you.
Thank you.